Who do you want to be? I love kind of like. All right. Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit different here because, man, I was talking to Steven and we've gone through a ton of content, like a ton. Usually the content we've gone through already, it takes like 6 months plus with a client, and we've done it in less than 3. So I was like, we need to kind of slow down for a second and really recap. And I think this will be helpful for anybody watching, and you're taking this in. It feels like a fire hydrant, and you're just like trying to keep up, and it's overwhelming. This will just kind of help you take a deep breath and see what you want to invest in and think about a little bit more. You know, one thing about content, it's not meant to just be something we just take in. We gotta digest the food. We gotta actually digest it. And content is just a first start. I mean, we're not even talking about action. We're just talking about taking in stuff. And so if this is some of this content, it might be the first time you've ever heard it or seen it in this way. And that can be a lot to take in at one time with all the other things going in your life. So hopefully this will just be a way for you to just take it in a little bit differently and think about it a little bit differently. You're able to hear Steven as he's processed through it a little bit more week after week and has had questions and thought through it. And we're going to discuss that in here. So we're going to go through all the sessions. So this is going to be session 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we'll do this again in the future ones. But hopefully you'll be able to get some context to all the things we've been talking about so far. So, Steven, I think this will be really cool because literally today I was thinking, this is a lot. I mean, we have gone through a lot. These are things that I've developed in me for years. And I'm giving you this like crash course, and we're not even done in a 3-month time frame. So I know you who wants to like implement everything now, it's got to be challenging to try to figure out, what do I focus on? What do I do this? I know I want to focus on this. And there's things we haven't even got to yet. So I want to like be able to pump the brakes a little bit. I know you agree with that, and us just kind of go from session to session.
I love it. And I will say too, I think like my favorite books are the ones where like when I'm done a long chapter, it's got a little conclusion at the end. Because I do think there are some people in the world, I learned this the other day, by the way, I think I always mess up what the generation before millennials, like the younger generation before millennials is it
Gen Z?
Gen Z. Mm-hmm. 0.7 seconds we have to grab and capture their attention, which I don't think millennials are far off. I think we're like 1.1 seconds. But there's so much valuable information here, and I think the world deserves to have I don't know if SparkNotes is still a thing. You know SparkNotes?
I do.
All right, so
SparkNotes. I don't know if we got AI now, so.
Yeah, a ChatGPT version of asking the question and getting an answer, but I think it's gonna be really helpful for people.
Cool. So let's start in session 1. And some of these sessions I feel like it might go pretty quick. But session 1 was all about this picture of who you are. And we spent time there. We talked about just breaking down by ages. You came out with words that you felt that described you the best. There's probably more words that you probably have in your mind now. And then we introduced this concept of growth culture, which we talked about it more and more through different sessions, but it's such a big topic, you know? How do you rewire how you think? If you had more of a deaf culture, it's like, how do you have a growth culture? And so those are the 2 areas we really focus on, but we also went through the whole Grow or Die framework. I mean, we started talking about, all right, do you focus on where you fit in, what's popular, what do you want to do with your life? And then this whole picture of seeing the house, of being present, to this growth-minded area, the plane of looking out at the areas you want to grow in, all the way to the world, being a visionary. And then you kind of go into, all right, here are the 3 questions we want to ask ourselves. Who are you? Who are you becoming? And who do you want to be? And so we talked through that framework. We talked through growth culture and who you are a little bit more and why it's so important, and we want to become more of who we are, and how people live with an outdated version of themselves sometimes. So let's just unpack that a little bit. Any thoughts, questions, things go on in your mind as you hear those things?
So many. So like the biggest things that come to my mind, I think from episode 1 that I loved is what I'll chalk up to this concept of like strategy and tactics and how much time you're spending at home, on the airplane, and changing the world. And I think the suggestions and the amount of time that we spend, and there are these, we hear these like these sayings all the time, how like if we're living in the past, we're gonna feel a certain way. If we're living in the future, we're gonna feel a certain way. But when you're present, that's when you can be happy and you can enjoy the process. And I think there's a awareness that needs to happen. And what's so refreshing about where we started this session is it reminded me a lot about helping me be more aware. And when we talk about like the words to describe me, one of the like most special parts of that first episode for me was also the realization that we can just focus on the best of ourselves, right? I think I tend to have a negative reaction, or what we now know as a death culture perspective. There's just a simple awareness and intention to being a more positive person, and also treating yourself with kindness, which I think is really special.
I love that. You know, so interesting. I mean, I love how you said, I can actually focus on the positive. And there's almost like this, I'm sure people hear that and like, but I have all this negative. So what has maybe shifted, because you know the negative still is there, like, is there anything that has shifted with knowing the negatives there, but also focus on the positive? Like, what changed?
Yeah, and they're still here, right? I think that's where like we're in the fast forward, you know, like in every day I get a little bit better. But as we know, this is a continuous, sustainable growth. But it's awareness for me, man. Like, it's being able to be honest with myself. And again, on the walk today with Kay, I was just going in on all of the negative things, and it was my moment, which like on our walks nowadays, it's kind of like an opportunity for me to just get it all out. All the insecurities, all the pessimistic thoughts and things that have happened, like getting it out. And then having these positive intended conversations of like, how do I want to focus going forward? And we talked a little bit about it when I walked in about what's in my control and what's not, right? And if you just focus on the things that are in your control, on the growth concepts, it's huge, man. But everything's going to come back to awareness, right? And I think that's also where the grow or die framework that's laid out is the home that I'm always going to come back to. Because, and we talked a little bit about this in a later episode, the reality is if you're doing everything that you're doing to become the person you want to be, the concepts of making any decisions, whether that's surrounding yourself with certain people, whether that's deciding to go to certain events, whether that's an action that you're going to take in terms of your priorities for the day, it's much more straightforward, and it's also much more satisfying. And I can feel as I get outside of the framework, it doesn't feel right.
Gosh, that's so good. You mentioned and said everything comes back to awareness. And bro, if I could say the success of session 1, that's really it. I was driving with Lewis. We were coming back from Big Canoe, and we were having a conversation. When I got back in my car, I was like, holy crap, I was being super negative about the topic we were talking about. Like, I was more in a deaf culture. I wasn't down on myself for that. I wasn't like, I need to call him right now and tell him, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, he would have been like, dude, what's wrong with you? You're good. But the awareness alone for me was great, because now I was aware of it, and now I can say, I want to shift this a little bit. All right, I need to think about this differently. So the awareness is it. I don't need to tell everybody like, hey y'all, just so you know, I was negative right here. Everybody has moments of that, but the fact that I can step back and see it more clearly and make changes is where the real win is.
If you're cool with it, I'd love to put the video that you sent to, I don't know if you sent it to group 1 too, but like the video too about your oatmeal cream pies was, because I think we're always so fixated on when we do positive things, that's growth. But when we don't do things, that can also be growth. Even just being aware is growth. And I'm learning that all the time too. And I have a a snippet that when I say it, I know I'm talking about death culture because it says, I'm going to talk about death culture real quick. It's like common vernacular around the house now. And again, it's helpful for me in certain situations to just get it out and then put the lid back on, right? And the analogy that you use throughout the season so far is you can go into the room, take a peek, but you don't have to live there.
You don't have to live there. I love it. Anything else from session 1 before we move on to session 2?
I think just like reiterating too, like when we talk about awareness, as all of you, like as you go and you do the homework and you look at this list of adjectives. We talked about this too in one of the episodes where I'm not good with like the English language, nouns, verbs, adjectives. We'll do another confessional. But take some time and remind yourself what an awesome person you can be when you're at your best. Like, that was really refreshing, and not every day are you like getting out of bed being like, hold on, let me look at a ton of adjectives and remind myself that I'm strategic, methodical, humorous. Like, all of those things are so helpful in terms of how do you want to set your intentions. And remember, everybody's got a lot of really great characteristics. Yes, you have some things that you got to work on, but if you really focus on the good and you sharpen the tip of that spear, kick some butt today.
I love it, man. I like you closing like that. So I feel like at the end of each one, you just kind of give your little...
I'll do my best.
Okay.
You.